Hello, everybody. I'm Olivia Mattis of the Sousa Mendes Foundation. I am so thrilled and delighted that you have decided to watch this glorious film and to join us today for the discussion. Today's film that we showed you, that we gave you access to, is probably one of the best that we have shown in these 3 years of doing these Sunday programs. And it has literally taken me 3 years to bring this to you. I've wanted to bring it to you from the beginning, and now here we finally are. And with such an incredible panel, we have our own resident historian, Dr. Mordecai Paldiel, who you know very well from other programs, who was for 24 years at Yad Vashem. But not only that, he is at the origin of today's film and today's program. Why? Because the photographer who's in the film came to see Dr. Paldiel, and it was Dr. Paldiel who told him about Albania and the rescue of Jews during World War II. And it was as a result of that conversation that then that film got made. And that's where our second speaker comes in. And that is one of the film's producers, that's Jason Williams. And he made the movie magic that turned the story into an epic. To me, it's like the Iliad or the Odyssey. It is such an incredible film that takes you on a journey. The fact that we meet Aron Etrogi early on in the film, but we don't know who he is yet. And then later we understand who he is once there's the knock on the door. I mean, everything about this film is so brilliant. And I am just beyond honored to have Jason Williams with us today. And then we have two of the stars of the film. And that is Ermal Hoja.
Oh,
And Shai Etrogi.
hello.
Ermal is the son of Recep Hoja, who is the one who had taken on this promise from his father and maybe passed it on in some way to his son. His son traveled with him to Jerusalem and lived the story with his father. Shai Etrogi is the son of Aron Etrogi, who originally was Aron Alajem from Bulgaria. And Shai didn't know a thing about the story until the film crew contacted him, and he will tell you from his perspective what that whole journey was like, the journey of discovery. So it's quite amazing that here we have a film and we have a panel with the next generation talking about the impact on them. And we also always want to talk about the transmission of memory. So I think this is probably one of the most important programs that we've done in the 3 years of our programs. So again, thank you for joining us. And we will first hear from Dr. Mordecai Paldiel. So Mordecai, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Olivia, and welcome to all of you. Today's program, it's about a little country called Albania. And if we can have a look at the map, Albania is part of Europe, but it's so different from every other country in Europe. It's European, but not European. They have their own distinct history going back to Roman days. Eventually, they were under Turkish occupation, and then they adopted the Islamic religion. Over 80% of all Albanians are Muslims, but there are also Christians, the Greek Orthodox Church, the Catholic Church, and they've been getting along fine with each other. Now look on the map. Look to the south, you have Greece. And then to the east, you have Bulgaria. There's a little country called Macedonia to the south of Bulgaria, which it's not spelled out, but that's Macedonia. And on top right, you have Serbia, and on the left, you have Montenegro. And then on the extreme left, you have Italy. You see the little thing protruding Italy. There's the Adriatic Sea, which is dividing the two countries. So why are we talking about Albania? Because Albania has the distinct privilege of being probably the only country in Europe that not only allowed Jews to come in who were fleeing from the Germans, but he actually welcomed them and made it a principle of pride to shelter and save them from the Germans. Now, Albania had lost its independence in 1939, and from 1939 to 1944, first it was under the Italians and then under the Germans, and then came almost 50 years of one of the most brutal communist regimes that lasted for almost 50 years. More communist than any other communist government. And then when that regime fell, the Albanian people asserted themselves and their religion. And then they prided themselves of having saved more Jews at the end of the war than at the beginning of the war. At the beginning of the war, there were 200 Jews. At the end of the war, there were 2,000. Can we see next slide? I just want to go for briefly, this is not a history lecture, but on the left, you see they had even a king, King Zog on the left. When the Italians invaded in 1939 and annexed Albania to the Italian Empire, they expelled him. And on the right, you have Enver Hoxha. He came into power in 1944 when the Germans left, and he installed that very brutal communist regime, which lasted until he died. One of the most brutal communist regimes of all the other communist regimes in Europe, including China. Next slide. So when I worked at Yad Vashem, nobody have heard of Albania. Nobody have heard about what they did to the Jews, how they helped the Jews survive. And one day, Norman Gershman, a photographer, came to see me, and he wanted to take pictures of people that we at Yad Vashem honored as righteous. So I said, Norman, you are a photographer. You have been all over the place, Cuba, Russia, you name it. How about Albania? It's a very little country, but it's very easy to get there from Italy. And I have the names and the addresses of those Albanians that we at Yad Vashem have already honored. And why don't you go and take some snapshots of them and create an album? And I sat him down in a little room. I gave him the files. I gave him the addresses. I introduced him to some Albanians who had already left and come to Israel. This is after the communist regime collapsed. And he went out there and took pictures. He became so fascinated. He became so converted to Albania. And I was afraid he was going to settle in Albania, becoming an Albanian citizen. It went so far. And the rest of the story is history. And those of you who haven't seen his book, the album film Besa, I strongly urge you to buy it. He, unfortunately, is no longer with us. He died a few years ago in Miami. Next slide. The first Albanian to be honored by Yad Vashem was a family of Vesely, Refik Vesely. Here you have Vesely's wife sitting on the left, the film, the black and white, and Refik is on the wall. Why isn't he there? Because he had died already. But before he died, he managed to come to Yad Vashem, and on the right-hand picture, you see Refik at Yad Vashem. I'm standing next to him, and he's accepting the applause of the people when he received the first honor, the first Albanian to be honored with the righteous title by Yad Vashem. This, I believe, was in 1991. And then later on, this was followed, next slide. This was followed with the story that Norman Gershman discovered the family, the Hoja. And the Hoja had sheltered a Jewish family, of which you will hear more by the filmmaker Jason and by Shai Etrogi. Shai Etrogi, in fact, is part of that Jewish family that Hoja saved. And the fascinating thing about it, when they left at the end of the war, they left Albania, and they left behind 3 prayer books, the High Holiday prayer books. And the Hoja, of course, didn't read any Hebrew, but this is something about Albania. When they have what is called Besa, Besa is a word of honor, and they decided that they're not going to take these books and throw them away or put them away. They're going to hold on to these 3 prayer books until they would locate the Jewish family that had left and had gone to then Palestine, then Israel. And prayer books during the communist regime would land you in jail because that communist regime that ruled Albania for over 40 years, close to 50 years, was very anti-religious. So, but they kept it, and finally, with the help of Norman Gershman and the help of Jason Williams, who made the film, they located the family who had assumed a Hebrew name, Etrogi, and they located in Tel Aviv. And for the rest of that, of course, you will hear more. So this was my brief introduction in this most amazing story of this the Hoja family and all the other Albanians that you have seen in the film, and the return of these prayer books. And for that, more on that story, I turn the floor over to the filmmaker, Jason Williams. Jason, take the mic, please.
Thank you so much, Mordecai. It is a delight seeing these marvelous pictures from 1991. I mean, you know, we all look better back then, don't we? It's amazing, great. I had not seen that photograph, and it's just marvelous, marvelous. It always reminded me that that great shot of him, the first individual brought into the righteous, as recognized as righteous among the nations. That huge photograph of him, which the family are just so proud of, as Norman says in the film, it could have been taken by Norman. It has that real look of one of Norman's images. I just want to say a big thank you to Olivia Mattis. She has hotly pursued me. I won't tell my spouse. No, you've been amazing, Olivia. You've been amazing. And I'm really delighted. And most importantly, just to see this big crew joining this meeting. I mean, I'm a filmmaker, you know. We're all about bums in seats, as we like to say in Great Britain. You know, we love a good crowd, and you're all showing up in the middle of a weekend afternoon. And I really, my great gratitude to everybody who has chosen to spend some of their day and their time today here. I will leave one last thing, which is the Iliad and the Odyssey. Olivia. Oh my Lord, you know, we don't get one of those very often. Oh, I'm going to put that up, you know, next to the Emmys, you know, Iliad and Odyssey. All right, not bad, not bad. Mordecai, thank you. I told everybody here that I would be brief. It's not easy for me. I really want to just say a few words, most importantly, about Norman Gershman. I tried to show everybody a picture of me and Norman. Was taken, I believe, in 1991. No, maybe 1901, I think. 1990, maybe, at the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Jewish autonomous region of Birobidzhan, which is this sort of strange little corner of the Jewish world. And it had a very, very mixed history indeed, tragic history in many ways. But at the age of 28, Norman, I'm now 65, so almost 40 years ago, Norman took me as his assistant camera person to Birobidzhan. And I, at that time, was, there's me with a camera back in the day. Look at that. And I spent the most extraordinary time with Norman. Norman and I had already become fast friends. We were such fast friends that I'd actually married his firstborn child, his daughter, Leslie. So to say that, you know, Norman and I were tighter than tree bark, it would not be incorrect. Norman has had a very, very profound influence on my life. Leslie and I eventually went in different directions, but Norman and I did not. We really just enjoyed each other's company greatly, and I loved his work. I thought he was a really genuine fine art photographer. Back in the early '80s, you know, I speak to Norm at least, you know, once, 2, 3 times a year, and he calls me up and he goes, do you know anything about Albania? And I, of course, knew very little about Albania. And he told me basically what Mordecai has just said, this remarkable history of this remarkable European country, the only European country whose Jewish population increased during World War II. I think if you want to get a sense of the radical difference between Albania and the rest of Europe, all you have to do is draw a line basically due west to east from the capital city, Tirana, and you'll basically run into Thessalonica. Back in there, Thessaloniki, I believe, is more the sort of Greek name for it. There are a lot of reasons why what happened in Tirana was so different to what happened in Thessaloniki. And I'm not, you know, I got nothing against the Greek people, and it really has its own unique history. But I do think it is worth observing that Thessalonica, which had the oldest European contiguous, consistent population of Jews in Europe. I mean, I think, I'm not an expert on this one, but I think from, you know, the initial Ladana community, if I remember rightly, it was like it goes back 200 years prior to the BCE, before the Christian era, Common Era. 98% of the Jews of Thessaloniki, this incredibly rich Jewish population, were exterminated. Go west 100 miles. Maybe I really am not 100% certain if more than 1 or 2 of the Jews were already living in Albania and were then brought into Albania under the protection of both King Zog and, of course, of the Muslim hierarchy. Maybe 1 or 2 found their ways, were captured by the occupying Nazis. Maybe 1 or 2. We actually weren't able to specifically identify 1 even. But there's enough apocryphal word out there that suggests maybe 1 or 2 stumbled into the hands of the Nazis. That accident, except it's not an accident, that reality of geography, 100 miles, and such an extraordinary different outcome. I'll leave that there. Thank you again. My great privilege to, as Mordecai said, to take the microphone, give it to Amal. And it's great to see you, Amal. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And hello, everyone. I would really like to thank the Sousa Mendes Foundation and especially Olivia for this invitation. It's really nice to be here, and I'm actually honored to be here. And I would like to extend also on behalf of my father, Recep, our gratitude, not just to JWM production, but specifically to Jason Williams for the making of Besa, and actually to Professor Paldiel for his efforts so that the Hoja family could have the certificate of honor, which was a great thing for us. And I have a very short presentation, hope to make it in time. And please, Michael, if can you share the screen? Yes, thank you. So this is my point of view as a third generation. So I'm the son of Recep Hoja, and here it is, the first picture showing the first time that, and the last time, unfortunately, of screening of Besa in Tirana in 2012. And there you can see me, my father, my sister, my mother, and part of the production of JWM. And actually, it was a great event for us because actually it started somehow a kind of another process for us, which was understanding what my grandfathers did in another point of view. So it actually started for us just as a fulfillment of a promise, but actually it became a bit bigger. On this occasion, me and my daughter actually are are very enthusiastic about this story because we are still learning things from my grandparents. And the next slide. Here you can see my great-grandfather Abdul on the left with his brother. He was actually an imam, so part of the cleric of the Muslim religion, and he was in the house when the Etrogi and the Alajem family came, and he let his room actually to this family. It was not important for him that they weren't Muslims, so it was, in my opinion, it was a very great gesture that he made. So learning from my great-grandfather. Next slide, please. Here you have Rifat. He was a pastry chef, and he is in his pastry uniform. And he liked very much not just pastry, but also the gardening. And here you can see the garden here, which is at our house, at our old house. And what I would like to add here is that all the neighborhood, it was formed by these little houses with small courtyards, which were somehow a community. And all the houses, not all, but most of them, were connected to each other with little doors, so people could go through the courtyards of each other. It was kind of a big family. I think it was important in this story because saving people maybe in this kind of environment was maybe easy. I don't know, but I have to say this. Next slide. Here you have Feyziye and Rifat on their wedding day, and what you see behind on the background is the house where everything happened, where the Alajan family was saved. Here they are in 41. Next slide. So it was really important for us not just to hear about what happened to the Alajan family and how they were saved, but also understand the environment where this and how this story happened and what my grandfathers did. So it was also a process of discovering for me and my daughter, actually. Next slide. So for us, as I said, started as something very simple, just a promise to keep, just a promise to fulfill. But actually, when we went to Tel Aviv in 2009 and met the Alajan family, now at Rogi, and we saw that they were growing in prosperity and were, I think, happy. So it was very, very, very strong emotion for us, and it was a great feeling. And we understood that it was not just the story of two families here; it was the story of people saving other people. So a lot of humanity that should be spread, I think, and should be passed to new generations. So the next slide. Here you have my father, Recep, during the movie Besa the Promise, with the 3 books in his hand. So we didn't figure still yet what was going on after Besa the Promise. But the next slide. Recep became quite famous here in Tirana because he was honored, of course, on behalf of what Rifat, so my grandfather and my grandmother, Feyziye, did, but he was honored with the Certificate of Honor by the Ambassador of Israel, Mr. Rotkin, in 2016. And next slide. He also was awarded by the president of Albania with the title of Honor of the Nation in 2017. So it was a great period. And for my daughter, for example, he's kind of a, how can I say, kind of a rock star. So it was very important for me that my daughter learns these kind of stories. Next slide. So what I want to say here is that we spend a lot of time together. Well, with my sister less because she lives in Dublin, but when she comes, we used to get together, cook together, eat together, and to share these stories. And what's really fun and really important is that the nephews and nieces of Recep are learning also this story. So it's really great, I think. Next slide. So yeah, here you have my wife and my daughter Yora with Recep. We often do these little walks in our old neighborhood, which still stands there. And during this time, Recep keeps telling stories, so a lot of discovering. And if you go please to the next slide, what's actually happening is that the house is still there, but what's happening is that there is a lot of pressure actually from developers and investors to build there. So somehow this house still resists, but this is the place where everything happens. So what's going on in the neighborhood is that somehow this whole community risks the erasing. So no one cares anymore for the cultural things. They just want to build. There you see the American flag with the Albanian flag. Someone thinks that America will save them, but what I actually want to say at this point is that I really appreciate, and I think it's really great what the Sousa Mendes Foundation is doing, because actually not wanted to close in pessimistic way, but I think what the Sousa Mendes Foundation is doing is great, because they are actually saving a physical part of the history. So and sometimes, as the case in Tirana, maybe this is not possible anymore. So really thankful to Olivia, to the foundation that are doing what are they doing. I think is really important. I would like to thank everyone, and I would like to leave the word to Shai Atrogi, which is here also. Hello, Shai.
Hello, Amal, and thank you for the beautiful presentation. And hello, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the Sousa Mendes Foundation for having me on your program. I'm happy to be able to share my personal thoughts and feeling about this amazing story, my family story. Well, I didn't knew about this story because the common practice in Israel with all the survivors from the Holocaust is to not speak about it. I have friends and their parents are survivors from Auschwitz or other camps, and they didn't talk about it either. We grew up at the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s in Israel. Israel was young at that time, and the common practice there was to not say anything about the period of World War II and the tragic life that they had suffered through. Actually, this story was never told to me until the telephone rang. And on the other side of the line was a woman I didn't know. She said that her name was Rachel, and she would like to speak with me about a story that I didn't know. I just knew that my father's story went further. It was more than I took my family and ran out of Bulgaria to try and reach Spain. This is the only information that my father agreed to share with me when I asked him several times over the years what happened during World War II. Because I find this part of history fascinating, it is something that I have been reading about for years. I found this war very interesting and relevant today and every day It is relevant, and we must appreciate how precious democracy is, and that is not always obvious. One day, towards the end of 2006, the telephone rang. The production had been ongoing for some time, but it was about a month or so before the movie started shooting in Israel. That's when I heard the story for the very first time. A woman I had never met told me the story, and I was shocked. So I went back and met with my dad. It was Saturday. I remember it. It was lunchtime. I told him, listen, I got a phone call from a woman named Rachel in Washington, D.C., I think. She was a producer for JWM production. She told me the story that I have been asking my father to tell me for over 30 years. I asked my dad if it was true, and he said yes. Then I told him that they want to come to Israel and speak with all of us in person. And when we met, they said that they want to make a movie about your survival story. He said, I don't know, let me think about it. And so he thought about it. Rachel called again to see if my father had given it any more thought. My dad said, yes, of course I thought about it. I cannot stop thinking about it. I don't think it's a good idea. It's too big, too painful. I didn't succeed in persuading him, but in the meantime, my older son, Yoav, told him, listen, I have an assignment in school. I must tell our family story about the Holocaust. Everybody in school must do this assignment. My son asked his grandfather, what should I tell them in school? He finally said, okay. And my son had convinced him. So I called Rachel back to say that my dad had agreed to talk. Norman Gershman, Rachel's colleague and the soul of the project, explained that he knew of the story, but had to hear it firsthand. I was in the same position. I didn't want to hear what Rachel knew about my father. I wanted my dad to tell me his story. He told me his story. It was very emotional. He silently thought, and eventually told me that when he was 12 years old, Bulgaria began to feel unsafe for Jewish people. He thought they would be captured or arrested and sent to the concentration camp. My grandfather, Nissim Etrogi Alajem, at that time, apparently knew someone at the Spanish embassy, or perhaps the Spanish ambassador, who might have been able to get them visas to Spain. They needed these visas immediately, but were unable to get them quickly, or as it turned out, at all. The Germans were entering Bulgaria. They decided to make a run for Albania, one of the only countries where Jews were still allowed entry. They finally made it to Tirana. Well, the Italian regime in Albania between 1939 and 1943 was not very diligent about hunting Jews. But as the Germans got closer and closer, it became clear that they would be. The Germans were fanatic about capturing as many Jews as possible. And around this time in 1943, my father and my grandparents were hidden at the Hoja family house. It was very dangerous for the Hoja as well as for us. Once the Germans arrived, it became difficult to be outside for fear of capture, and eventually they knew it was essential to leave the Hoja family if they want to survive. The Hoja family was doing everything they could to keep us safe, but it was simply too dangerous. We had to leave. My grandparents decided to join the partisan and fight. To do so, they had to leave their son Aaron, my father, behind. It would have been dangerous to fight with a 12-year-old child. And my father was left with the Hoja family, and he became their son. He didn't speak Albanian, however, so he had to pretend to be mute. Even though the Nazi demand that local people turn in or snitch on any Jews they may know, the local helped in this charade. As hard as it is to believe, my father pretended to be mute for over a year. After a year, my grandparents came back and reunited with my father. It is just amazing that the action the Hoja family 8 years ago did are the only reason I'm here today with you. It taught me that only through action we can alter our situation for good or bad. The action that the Hoja family made in order for my family to survive can never be fully repaid. They saved our family, and for that I am forever grateful. As a result of this story, I have learned to look for people's humanity, to look for the best in people. I think about the danger the Hojas faced. It was truly life or death. I'm awed by their bravery. Heroes say they didn't even think about it. It was just the right things to do. Today, as Holocaust survivors are passing from this world, we need to be mindful that the younger generation will know these stories. As all Israelis know, never forget. The stories must be shared. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share my story with you. And Olivia, thank you for this show.
Of course.
And now I hand it over to you.
Wow. Well, the chat box is just exploding with people's questions. And of course, I encourage people to continue putting their questions in there. We will get to the questions in just a few moments. Right now, I want to tell you about what's upcoming at the Sousa Mendes Foundation in the month of May. So we are changing our schedule. Starting with today's program, we're going on an every 2-week schedule for the next little while. And this is kind of an experiment to see if you, our audience, are going to stay with us on this every other week schedule. And so please stay with us. So our next program will be on May 7th and the one after that on May 21st. The two programs we have upcoming in May have to do with Jewish heroes of World War II. These are people who were not honored by Yad Vashem because Yad Vashem does not have a mechanism for honoring Jewish heroes, strangely enough. But there is another organization called B'nai Brith International, which is in Jerusalem. The international headquarters is in Jerusalem, and they do have a Jewish rescuer citation. They have a mechanism for honoring Jewish rescuers of Jews during World War II. And so the two stories we're telling in May are two such people. On May 7th, we're focusing on a Dutch man. His name was Solomon Noach. He went by the name Sali Noach, and he was living in France, in Lyon, France. And we've heard of the Butcher of Lyon, who was Klaus Barbie, a very terrible man. But how many of you know that there was an angel of Lyon? And that's who we are focusing on, Sali Noach. We have Mordecai again as our expert. And we have Jacques Noach, who is the son of Sali Noach. And we have a man, a remarkable man, Herman Vader, who was saved by Sali Noach as a child, and then grew up to become a race car driver, a Jewish race car driver, and he built himself as the fastest Jew in the world. Very interesting, amazing life story. He was arrested as a child, released from prison by Sali Noach, and then he went on to have a remarkable life even before becoming a race car driver. So you will not want to miss this upcoming program called Sali Noach The Angel of Lyon, and that is on May 7th. May 21st, we're focusing on a German Jewish hero. He was a businessman. His name was Wilfred Israel. And he is an unsung hero. Really, people should know his name, and you will if you sign up for this program on May 21st. He made it his life's mission to keep saving more Jews. He had an opportunity to go to Palestine, to England, and he kept going back to Europe to bring more people out and more people out. He was the owner of the biggest department store in Berlin, and he managed to do remarkable things, and he was killed in his final rescue mission, shot down over the English Channel. And again, you must know his story, and so I hope you'll tune in on May 21st. Right now, we have a little trailer for the upcoming May 7th program about Sali Noah. So here comes the trailer.
Resistance in World War II wasn't all about guns and sabotage.
I think of Sali Noah as being in a category of relatively unsung heroes.
Sally and my father arrived at the prison, and Sally went inside. He got everybody out.
I think he was a master in bluffing.
This was unbelievable. He rescued so many people.
Certaines personnes ont pu dire oui, Sali Noah a fait un petit peu moins de choses qu'il le prétend, mais c'était une période de guerre, une période de trouble. Mais je crois que ça fait partie des gens ordinaires qui font des choses extraordinaires.
I still want to have real proof that it happened.
Okay, so after today's program, you will get an email with information about how to sign up for these upcoming programs. And now to your questions. So this first question is for Jason, and it's probably the most important question asked by any audience member. And the question is there any chance that this magnificent and vital film will be made available on DVD or for streaming so that many more people can learn its magnificent lessons? I deeply hope this will occur soon. Thank you. So, Jason, what's the answer?
The answer is that despite, I mean, you know, I said, my whole goal is to have as many people as possible to watch this film. I would love this film to be very, very broadly available. We have had absolutely no luck finding distribution for it, which is, to me, one of the sort of enduring, mysteries of my life. I think it's a rather good film. And I think it's an extraordinarily important film. And, whenever I am so fortunate as to be with the folks here with Shai, with Mordecai and with Amal, I feel, I just scratch my head. Why has this film not been more effectively distributed? I don't know. It is currently meant to be, it currently is being distributed by one of the premier film distributors in the world, an organization called Off the Fence. They have not managed to penetrate the marketplace at all. Don't know why. We offered it to PBS years ago, and and they wouldn't take it. I think partly it's because it's got subtitles, and there's this like peculiar burden which subtitle films have, particularly in the American marketplace. All I can tell you is I do my darndest, and I'm not going to say I put every moment of every day seeking distribution for the show, because I don't, but I would love it to be, available on Amazon or on Apple or on any of these other venues you think would want it. But yeah, one of the big, enigmas of my life is how a film which has received such immense, people really, it's been a very important film for a lot of people, a lot of different reasons. It's beyond me, but there you go. That's where it is. If I can change that. I know Norman's son, Eric, and I are working on creating a shorter film. That might have some more luck, but I don't know. Okay. I'm sorry to, just a horribly useless answer.
Let me know if there's any way that the foundation can help. Obviously, I totally agree with this audience member. Everybody needs to see this film.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Next question is for Shai, and that is, if you could tell us a little bit more about your family history. Now that you've learned a little bit more, the question is specifically this. What did Nisim, Sarah, and Aaron go through after leaving Albania, but before the war ended? And did Aaron leave Albania together with his parents? In other words, fill in a little bit of that history that's not told in the film, if you could, please.
Yeah, well, after Bulgaria was saved from Nazis, it was at the end of September 44, something around that. They came back to Bulgaria after they were reunited in Albania. And my father decided that it will be again very problematic, because he feel that the Soviet occupation will be in a way a different regime that he cannot live under. And they decided to make Aliyah to Israel, and they arrived to Israel at after the Israeli state were established in 1948, and they built a life here in Israel at that time. It was quite hard. My father went to a kibbutz and lived there for several years, and then he joined the army, the IDF, and he participated in the wars in Israel. And later on, he knew my mom, and then I became to the world. I'm a single child, and more or less that's it.
Okay, so this is a question, let's see, for Mordecai, I think, and that has to do with the history. So were there any Jews living in Albania before the war, or did they only come in during the war?
Yes, there were Jews living in Albania before the war. It's estimated 200, 250, not too many. Albania was economically backward. It was not attractive. There was nothing one could hope to sustain oneself in Albania. But I have to mention that the king of Albania then, King Zog, that's before the Italians came in, he told his ambassadors all over Europe that to give Albanian visas to anyone who felt a need to go someplace, because it was so difficult in those years to get a visa to any place. There was even a story that the Albanians pride themselves that even Albert Einstein, when he had to leave Germany, stopped over in Albania before he headed to Princeton University. So that's just, and they pride themselves on that, the Albanians. They pride themselves very much. So there were about 200, 250, but when the war ended, there were a little bit over 2,000. And the difference between the 200 and 250, the 2,000, where all these others had fled like the family of Etrogi. They had fled from Bulgaria, they had fled from Yugoslavia, some of them from Greece, from the surrounding countries, and they fled to Albania because the word had gotten out that in Albania you were safe. You would not be persecuted because you were born a Jew, or because, so the word got out and they fled to Albania, and they were not disappointed.
Okay, and this question is for Armal. And Armal, the question is about the concept of Besa. So the question is, can you talk a little bit more about this concept? Is this still something that is current in Albania today? Is this taught from parents to children? What is Besa? What does it mean to you? Is it something you're teaching your children? Tell us about Besa in Albania today, nowadays.
Yeah, the concept of Besa is actually, I think it's really ancient. So, can you hear me? Yeah. But as I was discussing also with my father, if was the Besa as a kind of code of honor that my grandfathers were following, I don't know. But as we understand it now, it's not that it was something that was written in a slab of stone. I mean, it's not something that was so so strict. I mean, what the Albanians did in that period, I think it's more not just the Besa, but it was also the way how they were living, how they were taught, I think, how to treat other people. So was somehow a great humanity, I think. So if maybe calling it Besa, it's simpler to understand because of course there are centuries of culture there. So, but it was their way how they behaved, and what's happening now is that actually you can find the Besa in some really small areas, maybe in the north of Albania, but it's not so frequent to talk about Besa in the urban areas. So yes, we are a bit obsessed with the word given. So when someone gives the word to, so they will do something, they tend to keep it. So they just follow this kind of rule. But in terms of I don't know, of humanity and saving other people, I think the conditions in Albania have changed. As I said, also my neighborhood is changing. So with that will change also the way of living. And I'm not sure if maybe, I don't know, if the same thing will happen nowadays. I don't know if I can host anyone in my apartment, for example. So I think there were a series of elements, of phenomena that were happening in that period. I think, yes, Besa it's a strong concept, but I think it goes beyond the concept of Besa.
Now, Ermal, you just said your apartment, but I thought I had understood that you still live in the same house where the events happened in 1940?
No, me no. Recep, my father, yes.
Father lives there, okay. And you were concerned about the gentrification or globalization.
Yeah, of
and
course.
I know that you're in the field of architecture yourself. So tell us, is there any way, and some of our audience is asking this as well, to protect that house as a historic place where this important event happened, an event that gave rise to a whole movie that we're speaking about today? I mean, how can we protect that house and that neighborhood? How can we help you?
Well, actually, I'm quite new in this in this matter, because I was quite young when all this happened, so I didn't understand the risks. Now that the risks are more present, and I can also call myself a professionist in architecture. Now I understand the real importance of that house being saved. I still don't know, actually, Olivia. I still don't know how this can be possible. How can we save it? Maybe I can ask some advices from you or other people by email, but I'm still at the beginning. I mean, I will try to do something, but I still don't know what can be the right thing to do now. Still don't know.
Okay, so we're getting to the end of the hour, and as I predicted, the hour has flown by. So I'd like to invite each of our panelists to give some closing remarks. And Shai, let's start with you, please.
Yeah, I have a small surprise for everybody. This is the diary that my grandmother wrote day by day through the whole period. Of course, the Hoja family is a rock star here at those events. You can see it's in handwriting. So all this period was written down day by day by my grandmother, Sarah Alajemet Rogi.
Wow, and the prayer books themselves, your family has given them to Yad Vashem, is that correct?
Yeah, my father gave them to Yad Vashem. Yeah.
I was so hoping you would bring them and show them to everybody, but they're at Yad Vashem, so what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So, Ermal, what would you like to say in closing?
Well, as I was saying even before, I would love to find a way to pass this story also to the Albanian youngers, because actually what's happening now in Albania is that the word Besa, the promise, is now kind of a catchy slogan used by politicians mostly, but actually many Albanians actually still don't know the details of this story. So if I would find a way to just to preserve it, and maybe I don't know, find a way to pass this story even physically to the next generations here in Tirana and in Albania, it would be great, I think.
I think, Jason, that's a question for you, right? How do we get it distributed in Albania? The US, Albania, Israel, everywhere. We want this film. So Jason,
it's really, I could not agree more. I mean, I can say that, you know, Eric and I are, you know, we've just revived conversations about how to re-secure distribution for it. We're doing everything we can. It's the wonderful thing is, you know, in a strange way, because this film has never been broadcast. I mean, it's been screened in literally hundreds of Jewish film festivals around the world, which is a great thing, and in many, many other film festivals. But, you know, it's a premiere broadcast awaits it in literally hundreds of countries around the world. So at some level, I think we're gonna crack this nut at some point. I just want to say, Olivia, thank you again. I should always do this. In addition to thanking, obviously, the Sousa Mendes Foundation, I need to, three really prominent organizations are responsible for enabling the making of film. Initially, first tranche of monies which we were able to secure came from the Righteous Persons Foundation, which is Steven Spielberg's foundation. Remarkably, we received an enormously, a really substantial gift from the Al-Walid bin Talal Foundation. He's a Saudi foundation, which, you know, really enabled this film and was an extraordinarily enlightened undertaking at that time. In these days of the Abraham Accords, it's beginning to seem that, you know, it's not quite the remarkable act of generosity that it was when it happened, now almost 15 years ago, but extraordinary thing. And then I really absolutely offer the old hat to the American National Endowment for the Humanities, which gave an immense support to this film, the largest ever single grant given to a single documentary film in the history of the National Endowment of Humanities. So,
Wow.
yeah, no, it's amazing. And I always, you know, I can't sit in front of, well, we got like 187 people here and not give credit to these organizations and foundations, which are so important in terms of having enabled myself and all of the others involved in the making of the film to do justice, we think, to now, you know, Amal and Shai's story. Shai, I cannot tell you how touched I was to hear this sort of update, and also Amal. But I mean, the photographs of Amal blew me away. That was wonderful, particularly the more recent photographs, because I have not seen those. But Shai, that story, I'm sure you may have shared it with Rachel, but that it was your son,
yeah,
who did the end run around your father and got
exactly.
I honestly, I didn't think he was going to do it. And we were all sitting in, you know, Washington, D.C. I mean, yeah, I had no fingernails left. We're like, oh my God, is he going to do it? Is he going to do it? I had no idea it was your son. So that's genius. That's genius.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wonderful story.
Mordecai, the last word goes to you.
Okay, a few remarks. I have to point out, we didn't mention Albania. Most 80% of Albanians are Muslims. These are Muslim people who, there's a Christian community. And the interesting thing is they've been getting along over the centuries, Christians and Muslims. I read about Albanian history and never read about any problems that these two communities faced each other. So they accepted each other. The fact that they practiced one religion and the Christians practice another religion. The second thing I want to point out is the amazing thing about Albania is, you know, the Albanians, they had political affiliations. They were very much upset, mostly against the Italians, because the Italians invaded Albania for no reason in 1939, and they deposed the king. And then the Germans came in 1943, they displaced the Italians, and some of the Albanians were happy that the Germans were displacing the Italians. However, when it came to the Jews, there was no collaboration whatsoever among the Albanians. I point this out because, and I worked at Yad Vashem for 24 years, and I was responsible for honoring thousands of righteous from Poland, from France, from Germany, and all these countries. There were collaborators who collaborated with the Germans, pointing out where Jews were, volunteering to point out Jews in order to get a reward. In all the countries, France, Germany, Belgium, Holland, and even more so in Eastern Europe, Poland, and so on. You don't have that in Albania. And I remember when I was sitting with people in Yad Vashem, and they told me, oh, I was saved by this person from Lithuania, and he was outstanding. The other Lithuanians, well, they turned in were Jews, they killed Jews. I never heard anything bad said about the Albanians, never, from the survivors. No collaboration. I'm sure there must have been some nasty guys, but I never heard from the survivors saying anything bad about Albania. So that's where Albania stands out. Finally, I want to make, and we should remember that, okay? And we can learn a lot from them. You don't have to be a great philosopher in order to learn that doing goodness came to them naturally, not because they read Hegel or Kant or the great philosophers, but they felt this is a natural response. So you don't have to be a great philosopher, okay? I don't want to discourage people from reading Hegel and Kant, but you simply, to be a mensch, you don't need that. Finally, I want something personal. When we honored the first Albanian, Vesely, and we had a custom at Yad Vashem that when we honored them and where we present them the medal and so on the table we have an Israeli flag, and on the other side of the table we have the flag of the country that we're honoring. And So when Vesely was allowed to leave Albania at the end of the communist regime, and he came, and I was in charge of the ceremony, and well, I had a small Israeli flag, but I couldn't figure out what the Albanian flag looked like. I called the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and I said, I need an Albanian flag. And they said, we don't know what it is because we still don't have relations with Albania. And so I finally found out that there was an Albanian Jew living in Israel. He had left. And I called him and I said, desperately, you need to tell us how it looks. And he says, I can draw it on a piece of paper. It's a bird with two heads and two wings with a lot of feathers, but it's different than it's not an eagle. So it's not like the German or the American or the Polish. And I said, draw it. And I took it to a custom designer, theatrical designer, was designing dresses. And I said, can you draw it more nicely? And then I went to a private firm and he cut it out on a fabric and we placed it on the podium. And I got it a day or two ahead of the ceremony. And finally, we had an Albanian flag at Yad Vashem, which is these two birds looking each, and they don't look so terrible. They don't look aggressive. Plain, if you look at their heads, they don't try to conquer any other country. And the feathers and everything. So that was in 1991, the first Albanian flag in Israel at Yad Vashem, drawn by a private person. This is all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Love it. Love it. What a great anecdote. Well, thank you, audience, for staying overtime. I see we've run a little bit over, but boy, I've been on the edge of my seat. I certainly do hope that everybody will join us in May. May 7th is that next program. And of course, my profound thanks to Jason and the other producers and Rachel Goslins, the director of the film, for making this really timeless document. And I'm very moved to have Armal and Shai here, letting us into their families, their personal stories, their histories. And Mordecai, I can't thank you enough for all that you do for the Sousa Mendes Foundation. So thanks to our panel, thanks to our audience, and have a wonderful day, everybody. Be well and see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.